Hey everybody, it's Dave here and Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers, been talking publicly about the Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece. That's right, a long time. And we're here to discuss them even more. Today we have 3 themes as usual. First one, Vikings Minicamp, fact or fiction. That should be an interesting one that Darren brought up. Second one is, will the competitive rebuild actually work? Quick hint, I think so. And the third one is our rookie spotlight of the week. And we are now to Mekhi Blackmon, cornerback out of USC. And can he make a difference, especially in his rookie season? We will all find out next on Two Old Bloggers. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey everybody, Dave here again, Darren over there. How are things in the Great White North, Darren?
Nice and not nearly as hot as it is we're in Austin, Texas. Thank God.
Yes. And to answer your question, Mary, it is presently 101 degrees with 112 feels like temperature and a dew point of 71 degrees, which is tropical. When you walk outside, it feels like you're walking into an indoor pool. It is so thick and oppressive, but it is beautiful here. So I'm not going to knock that. What's a little heat when between friends, especially the military types like myself that has spent months and months and years in the desert. This is nothing. We can knock it out. Not a big deal. Doug wants
Happy Father's Day to you, Dave, and all the
Doug
other
wants
fathers
to see
out there.
a game at US Bank. Yes, it is Father's Day for all of us here, and we wish, both Darren and I, to extend a happy Father's Day to all you gentlemen out there that we're fortunate enough to have children. They are a blessing, especially once they hit about 25.
Yeah, and you're not paying for their school anymore and stuff like that.
Well, especially when they start having kids, you have grandkids, then it's really cool.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I love my children. They are wonderful. Best part of me. So, anyways, let's get this show started. Starting with theme 1. But what a great title name. I want to give a shout out to Darren for coming up with that. Minicamp, fact or fiction? And now that I scroll down to the scene control, here we go.
There.
Minicamp thoughts.
Indeed, Dave. This week the Vikings had 2 days of mini camps. Another important date on the Vikings off-season calendar, and it's important because the media gets to watch some of the practice. You know, they're at least in for a portion of the both practices. So, if not all, and so they get a chance to write stories and give us fans who aren't there a flavor of what they saw, like who's playing where, who's with the ones, who's with the twos, anybody standing out, those sorts of things. And so a little bit of Vikings news for us and a little bit of on-field action to whet our appetite for training camp. And so what the beat writers didn't see was no Danielle Hunter. That was the first thing. Not a surprise, of course. We knew he wasn't going to be there. You did a show earlier in the week with the real Forno, and went on a big rant about that whole thing. So check that out if you want. But not a surprise, and we knew Danielle Hunter was not going to be there until his contract situation is resolved. Isn't resolved yet, and so not a big surprise, but still for me, while it's not a big surprise, it is a big concern because I think Kwesi, in my mind anyway, he's got about a little bit over a month to get this, I think, resolved. Either you get Hunter a contract extension that everybody's happy with and he stays with the Vikings, or of course you don't and you trade him away and somebody else gets him, signs him to an extension, and we get whatever haul of draft picks we get. Or it could be a combination of draft picks and players. We don't know. But that would be the way to resolve it. And what we don't want to see, or what I don't want to see, is that in that month and a half, now the Vikings don't have to resolve it in a month's time. They can let this drag on. But I don't want to see it drag on until training camp, because I think that would be a horrible way to start the Vikings training camp, because the main story is going to be, where's Danielle Hunter? All the players are going to have to get asked about it and deflect questions. The coaches, Kevin O'Connell's going to have to answer to it. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to have to get answer to that. And I think that it's going to take away attention from the things that I think really are matter a bit more, or just as important as the on the field stuff, like how is Alexander Mattison doing in the number one running back role? How's the corner situation working out? Is Jordan Addison looking like he'll be a real explosive, dangerous complement to Justin Jefferson? Those are the questions that I want I want some answers to. I want the focus to be on that. I don't want it to be on Danielle Hunter's contract situation, because again, I don't think that's a good way to start your training camp. And coming off the 13-4 season, and you're defending the NFC North, you don't want all the talk to be about Danielle Hunter's contract and why he isn't here and what are you going to do about it. So that was
Kwesi needs to figure this out, no matter what. This is his first big test, I would say, of his tenure, and he needs to figure it out. Is Danielle underpaid? Yes. Did Danielle sign that contract? Yes. Does he deserve to be paid more? Yes. Now, was the patch that was reported of, hey, we'll just do the Band-Aid thing and get you through this year, and that tended to piss him off, was that a good thing? Well, probably not. But is rumors that Danielle's asking for the sky, wanting to be the highest paid edge rusher or close to it, is that good? No. So this is going to be interesting. He's under contract, right? No matter what, he's under contract.
Yep.
So he can refuse to play, and that will cost him. Because if he refuses to play, and that goes, and he'll receive fines upon fines through training camp, as I understand it. And then once the games start, he'll not only not receive his game checks, but the Vikings will be able to pull back bonus money that they've already given him. And that's presently there. So that's motivations for him to be there no matter what. Now, hopefully they come up with a deal in the next few weeks and we all hear about it and everybody's all happy and good. And if we got Danielle Hunter, locked for the next 3, I would like to see a 3-year extension on top of this year, and everybody would be happy. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
Yeah, you had Kevin O'Connell's photo up there a little bit earlier, and he got asked about it, of course, and he said that he felt that he's hopeful that there's a way forward where Danielle Hunter remains with the Vikings this year and in future years. But we also said in this show, there's the old saying that I repeat sometimes, is that hope is not a plan. So you've again, like you said, Kwesi's got to figure this out. And it's going to be that last piece of that offseason puzzle that he's got to solve. Dalvin Cook's been resolved. Maybe not the way we wanted it to, as far as because we didn't get anything for him, but he's gone. Zadarius Smith was traded, and blah 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 blah. Kendricks is gone. Adam Thielen's gone. Danielle Hunter is the last piece of the offseason, and that he's got to get figured out. I guess the good news is that Danielle Hunter we didn't see. We did see Justin Jefferson.
Yes,
and
we
to
did.
me, that was big. Of course, he got asked about the contract situation, which he deflected. Good for him. I think, maybe he's in a little bit different situation than Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins, again, he got asked about it. And I think Kirk, he'll get asked about it more, but Kirk handled it, the good way. He said, well, I don't think it's going to get solved until March, so we're just going to play. And and so I think that if that's his line, that's a good line. Justin Jefferson kind of just said, hey, contract's going to get brought up. I leave that to my team. I'm just going to be me. And he kept on saying a version of that when he got asked about it, which is fine. But still, he did say, hey, I'll be there at training camp. And a few weeks ago and in the off season, I was worried. I thought that Justin Jefferson, even though he is under contract for 2 more years, he's not getting paid very much considering he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I thought that he might not set foot in the Vikings turf for the minicamp or training camp until he got that extension. And maybe this is why, Dave, that the Danielle Hunter situation hasn't been resolved, because maybe, the Kwesi's trying to work on that megabucks extension that Justin Jefferson is going to get from the Vikings at some point in time. So maybe he's trying to, he's got to sort those financials out with 2 players who want a pretty significant salary contract, contracts to.
You got to think it's
continue
more
with
just 2.
Yes, that's true.
Jefferson's the big one. Jefferson's going to get the Brinks truck, no matter what. So you got to take that. And Brzezinski needs to work his magic. Davey mentioned Brzezinski coming to the rescue. Brzezinski's going to have to work his magic over the years, right? We have Jefferson under contract for 2 years anyway, so there's a little bit of time to play with that. But it's cheaper if we do it early. So
yes,
but you have Jefferson, you have Danielle Hunter to figure out if you weren't going to make him fix or stick, whether you're going to make a decision on TJ Hawkinson, which I think you would. You gave a 2nd-round pick for him, and he looks to be a top 5 tight end in the league. Why wouldn't you? And then you get Darisaw next year that you're going to have to figure in his extension, and any other extensions you want to do after that. If they want to extend Cleveland, not that we've heard anything about that, per se, you're going to have to figure out how to work this. Some of it you may move money forward, some of it you may push money back and back end load it. Then throw on top of that, what happens if Kirk Cousins plays well this year, right? You've got to do all that contingency thinking of where we're going to put each and every dollar before possibly even going back to Danielle Hunter and saying, hey, here's our top of the line offer. You're going to take it or you're not. Either way, you're playing for us this year. Other than that, you're a free agent. You leave next year and we get a comp pick. Because he doesn't, well, no, that's not true either. He does have dead money. And if you have dead money in void years, you don't get the comp pick. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
8 dead money void year contracts. And I know Justin does as well. First off, I want to say hi to everybody that's on the chat. David Rinaldi, good Italian name. Dr. Proto, Mary, Raymond, of course. SKOL for life. Davey, Justin I already mentioned. And who else am I missing that popped on here? Mr. Bob Swede. And we got, of course, the doctor. SKOL for life. My worthless opinion. Everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are glad to have you on this happy Father's Day. And we hope we are making a little bit better and talking about some positive things in Vikings land and not so negative. I have faith that Brzezinski and the crew can make all this stuff work. So,
and Justin Jefferson saying that, I'll be at training camp was like a huge sigh of relief for me, Dave, because imagine if you go into training camp and Danielle Hunter, your best defensive player, is not there, and then your best offensive player, Justin Jefferson, isn't there. That would be a horrible, horrible way to start training camp. As you're trying to, again, defend the NFC North and build on a 13-4 season from last year. It would just be horrible. But that does not appear to be happening. It appears that Justin Jefferson is prepared to, at least for now, play in 2023 on the $2.4 million that he's scheduled to make. And so that was the good news. Part of the good news from the weekend, from the 2 days of OTAs. Justin Jefferson being there and looking happy as it could be, and catching balls, because he said, he was asked about why he wasn't there, and he said, "Hey, I had a lot going on, a lot of endorsements, something that." A little bit concerning. I want him to be focused on football, of course, but he does have other things that
he's concerned on making money outside of football with his foot, and that's a good thing. And he was working out in South Florida. He's not out of shape. Look at the picture. That's from this OTA. You can see the new tattoo on his leg. You can't see it clearly, but you can see that it's there.
Yeah.
So he's been working out.
He's been working out, and he said, I had a lot going on. The Vikings didn't really try hard to make me come to OTAs, and I didn't think I was missing too much. But I'm here now, and I'll be here at training camp. So that's all good. And as far as the OTAs, the fact and fiction thing was, you got 2 days where the Vikings, the media's in there, they're looking at, and they've got on-field work, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, different drills. And so you do get to see, again, certain who's playing with who, and who's with the ones and who's with the twos, and how they're matching up with things. I don't think that, again, you can take a lot out of 2 days in OTAs. The Vikings or coaching staff are probably just trying guys in different positions, see how they react to that, and then go from there. But a few things that caught my eye from a couple of the reports. Will Ragatz from Sports Illustrated, he mentioned that Jaquelin Roy was getting some work with the ones, which I thought is interesting. Again, don't know how much to take out of that, but we do know that the Vikings defensive line is not brimming with top-end talent. They could use a disruptive or two player in there who can make some plays. And so if Jaquelin Roy is showing in minicamp already that he is worth putting in there, maybe that says a bit about who we already got, and they're not very good, but it's encouraging to me, because I like
Jaquelin Roy could be that next person that steps up and is big for the Vikings.
I hope so. I liked the pick when we made it. I just didn't know what kind of impact Jaquelin Roy is going to have in his first year, but encouraging to see that he is making a push already, at least with the ones. Also, there was mention that Vidarian Lowe, the 6th round pick last year, who basically took a redshirt year as a rookie last year, barely dressed, that he was working with the ones at some time with Brian O'Neill at right tackle, with Brian O'Neill still out with the partially torn Achilles. Now, it also, Will Ragatz did say that Oli Udoh took most of the one snaps, but still Vidarian Lowe, he's a guy I think is a depth piece. We were expecting or hoping that he would take a leap and make it more and be more of a viable option depth-wise. So I think encouraging that maybe he is showing the coaching staff that he's worthy of being thrown in there with the ones, or being in the mix as a guy you can throw in if somebody gets hurt.
As a backup.
As a back.
Kirk Cousins talked about how good Oli is playing, right, at right tackle, and he is most definitely a right tackle versus left, and he's doing well. And obviously they gave him a break to bring Vidarian up. But Vidarian is the young guy, that can hopefully take that step and fall into that position probably next year. But if necessary, if O'Neill is late and you have Udoh working it right, and Udoh gets hurt, you need somebody there. And I think that's where Lowe fits in, and they want to make sure that he's ready for that. If, that goes worst case scenario and he has to come in, they want him ready. And I think that's good.
Yeah. It is a good plan. And the other thing that caught my eye, of course, is cornerbacks. And apparently on day one, the top 3 corners were, you had Caleb Evans on the outside with Mekhi Blackmon, the rookie, on the outside, and then Byron Murphy was working in the slot. And those were the top 3. And it looks like Andrew Booth Jr. is solidly right now the number 4 corner with no role on the starting 11 at this point. So again, don't know how much to take out of this, but again, like I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, about looking for Andrew Booth Jr. I'm looking for him to start to make a push for more snaps. And a bit concerning to me that he is not ahead of a Caleb Evans and apparently maybe not ahead of Mekhi Blackmon even. Although, again, you want the best guys out there. I don't care who plays well. If they're an undrafted free agent, a seventh rounder, a third rounder, a second rounder, or whatever, I just want 3 or 4 guys who play well and can stop the other team from completing passes against us. So whether it's Andrew Booth Jr. or a Caleb Evans or Mekhi Blackmon, don't care. But still, I expected a lot from Andrew Booth Jr. He did have a strong start to training camp last year. And to see that he's not getting in there and not unseating some of these guys like a Caleb Evans or Mekhi Blackmon, I just noteworthy to me.
As well it should be. I mean, you hope that the top picks in the draft live up to their pick placements, whether it be Booth or whether it be Seen, and neither of those two yet have stepped up and moved into what seems to be the starting realm as of right now. So,
and there's starting positions for the taking there for both of them, and they are not taking it at this point.
You got that right. So that brings us to theme 2. Competitive rebuild.
Yes. Will it work? I don't know if we remember when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah used this phrase last offseason, might have been in February or March or something like that. But I don't know, maybe he did, but I don't know if when he uttered that phrase, Dave, I don't know if he realized that it was going to have the shelf life that it has had. It just keeps getting brung up by national media, by Vikings beat writers, by fans like ourselves. And it's kind of like become that phrase. It's had the shelf life similar to what I'm going to throw in a basketball example here now, but Sam Hinkie, the ex-Philadelphia 76ers GM, when he was tanking the 76ers in the mid 2013, 2014, he was just getting rid of players, bringing in guys for salary cap and getting a ton of draft picks. And he called it the process. And that's still used today with the 76ers, even though they've become one of the better teams in the NBA. But
you can't believe how many memes I found on that, looking up for a picture of this guy.
He has but the competitive rebuild hasn't quite hit the process level yet, but it has had a long shelf life. And I think part of that is because when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah brought that up, he was bringing out something where he was trying to have his cake and eat it too. I think where, we're going to turn over the roster, but we're still going to have a good team while we're doing it. And that's not the way that we traditionally view these, when a GM comes onto a team, we think they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to build up the roster, acquire guys, sign guys to extensions, so to keep them competitive in the playoff hunt and compete for a Super Bowl, or they're going to do basically strip the roster bare because they don't think that they can get to the Super Bowl and, put it down to like the nuts and then build up from there. And then you hope you acquire, and the expectation is that you're going to struggle for a year or two, but you're going to gather a bunch of premium draft picks, which you're going to use to pick guys that are going to become cornerstones for your team. And also you get a load of cap space available, which allows you to sign free agents that you want that can maybe quicken the rebuild. That's what the Chicago Bears have done with Ryan Poles, and they did it.
Or at least
trying. That is not trying to. Whether it's successful or not, we'll see. But that's what Ryan Poles has done in Chicago. That is not what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has done with the Minnesota Vikings. And part of the reason why he didn't do that, a big reason, is that the Wilfs, Ziggy and Mark, gave him a mandate that we want to be competitive in 2022, Kwesi, and every other year. And so if that's your mandate and you accept the job as the GM of that team, you have to follow that mandate, and you can't strip the roster bare like Ryan Poles did. And so Kwesi Adofo-Mensah did not do that. And then 2022, you get a team that goes 13-4 and wins the NFC North title, and everything looks pretty good, I think.
Well, I think part of that mandate for 2022 in particular was bring everybody back and let's see if it was the coach and the GM of the previous administration that caused it, right? So they did that. They went 13-3. Now that they've proven that, they said they've given them a little bit more of a leash to, all right, now you can start your quote competitive rebuild. You started it a little bit last year. You can go full in on it. And that's why we see, instead of the old traditional way is we went 13-4. We got to bring everybody back again and just, fix where was the worst spot. We'll fix that one. We'll throw, a veteran free agent at it or something like that. And then we've done that for 15 years or better. And it never seems to work out. Always something else fails, or everybody and his brother gets hurt, or whatever it is. It never seems to work out. And I think this season they said, all right, now you can start that movement. And thus all the old timers gone. Kendricks, Peterson. You could list a bunch of them that are gone. Now the latest, Dalvin Cook. Not that you want to call him an old timer, but I think he's at that point in his career where he's starting to, right? And the only one they've kept so far is Harrison Smith, and he took a huge pay cut for that. The only other one they might keep, depending on how they work it out, is Danielle Hunter, and hopefully they do. But everybody else is basically gone, and this will probably continue into next season as well. Say Hicks, right? They've got Hicks back there as a starting linebacker. If Hicks' play does not improve and you have step up by Asamoah and maybe some of the younger guys, you might see Hicks go next season. You might see, Kirk Cousins go next season, stuff like that. But I think
Hicks is only under contract for 2 years anyway, so this is the last year of his contract. But yeah, with the way so Kwesi didn't tear things down in 2022, like you said. Was it you had a team that went 8-9 and was around the 500 mark for 2 years, and so the question was, bring you don't feel you need a full rebuild because, again, maybe it was the coach and GM, and a different coach and GM will lead to different results, and it did. But I get long term, the question is whether that continues. And now that the Vikings went 13-4 and won the NFC North title, like Kwesi, if the team had stunk last year, I think Kwesi would have really been scorched earth. Like you would be able to do that, but they didn't do that. They were actually pretty good. So even though the team, when you watched them, we did, even though the team clearly was not like Super Bowl contender, I don't think, despite their record, the Wolves and the fans aren't going to accept you taking huge, like a roster purge and taking 3 or 4 steps back to be a sucky team in 2023 after what you won the division title in 2022. Right. That's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But still, like Kevin Seifert wrote an article this week on ESPN, and he brought up a few things, some of which I knew and some of which I didn't know. That kind of shows that even though the rebuild part of the roster maybe hasn't happened as quickly as we expected, like it all happening in 2022, it is happening. And one of the things he mentioned is, and his article kind of talked about how Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is towing a line with trying to keep the team competitive, but also turning over the roster in his vision and what he wants to see. But 14 of the 22 Viking starters that he inherited from the Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer days are gone now. That's 64% of the starters. So that's a significant turnover. So in that sense, you can see the Vikings are rebuilding the roster and they haven't stayed pat. The other thing, which I didn't know,
considering the average is about, you lose a third every year.
Yeah. Hi, Jonathan. One thing Seifert also mentioned, which I did not know, was that now there's some things that still need to be worked out depending on the Justin Jefferson extension, what they do with Hawkinson, even with Kirk Cousins after 2023. There could be some things that change, but right now, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has the Vikings positioned to be in the top 10 in salary cap space, available salary cap space, both in 2024 and 2025, based on like how things are going right now. And we know the past 3 off seasons in particular, the Vikings have always been way over the cap. We knew they were going to be way over the cap heading into the off season. They needed to cut cap space, find ways to do that, whether it be restructuring contracts, cutting some guys. And we knew that they would find a way to be active in free agency, but we knew that they had limitations, and they probably they couldn't be as active as maybe they would like, because they had a lot of salary cap space to cut. And so the fact that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has them positioned for this in 2024 and 2025, I think, is good news, because again, if it'll allow us to be more flexible, even after extending Justin Jefferson and whoever else, we'll have the ability, I think, looks like right now, to
it's not
actually go after guys.
I don't think it's quite as fast as you might think it is, because once they start doing extensions, they may have to play with money and push it out even further. But they are making a dent in that.
Yes.
Right? And they've got to get it out. Just like we talked just a little while ago. Danielle Hunter has dead money into, I think, the next 2 years because of his present contract and how they reworked that twice. So he has dead money. Anybody that has dead money is no good for the Vikings, because if they play it out, we get no compensation. We get nothing, except for the next year, all that dead money comes and hits at once. So if Kirk Cousins doesn't play next year, we get a $28.5 million dead cap hit on him, if I remember correctly. Justin can correct me if I do not. But he's nibbling at that little by little, so we have more and more room. So when it comes to next season, we have more room to sign key free agents, right? And the season afterwards, key free agents. Yes, you're building up through the draft. You want all these young guys to play. But there might be that one person, say somebody gets hurt, or just that one position you haven't nailed yet. If you have the money to, you can go out and get that right guard or whoever it is, whatever position you want, because you now have enough money to play. You're not saying, oh, man, it'd be great to have the number 5 guard in the league, right? He's a free agent. Here's a chance. Go get him. Can we go get? No, because we still got to get $25 million. You know, we're owed $25 million over. Now we got to get $25 million under. And by the time we figure out how to get under and do all that stuff, he's already gone. Mm-hmm. And what can you afford? We can afford that $3 million, little over vet minimum dude. And it's like, yeah, but is he going to, move the needle? No.
Yeah.
So, but they're working on it. And that's the positive.
It is.
It's the positive. And we want it to be the positive. And if you have more space, you can move up Jefferson's massive contract, all those bonuses up forward, right? And knock them out so it doesn't hurt you on the backside when you know in 3 or 4 years you're going to need money then too. So you get it out of the way. And that's the way we used to do it. When Brez first was doing it, we had like Antoine Winfield. They gave all his bonus up front. And people are like, why are you doing that? Well, we got him cheap, and later years we picked up other free agents because we had room.
Yeah, there's great points, Dave. Along with the salary cap stuff and the gradual the turnover of the roster in the past 2 years, the Vikings right now only have 5 players who are 30 years or older on the roster. So we've gotten quite a bit younger, like Kirk Cousins, and 2 of them are Kirk Cousins and Andrew DePaolo, the long snapper, 2 positions where being over 30 doesn't always portend like a huge drop off in performance. And the other guys are Chris Reed, who's a reserve offensive lineman. You got the hitman, which you already mentioned. And then the other guy is Hicks. Who's only under contract for this year. So, and another thing that Seifert mentioned in his article is that of the 16 veteran players that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is signed to extended contracts, the average age of those guys is just under 27 years old. So again, in 2 years, he's made the Vikings roster younger, much younger, and it's cheaper. And he's got us positioned, I think, to be cap wise, to be, free agency wise, to be, you're in a good position to sign the cornerstones that you need, as well as maybe get key guys in free agency that can help with the competitive rebuild. Now, again, that this is not. Will it work? Again, will it work? That's a good question. It worked last year. That was just 1 year. But I do expect that the Vikings, they went 13-4 last year. I do expect them record-wise to take a step back. I don't know what that will be exactly, but very few teams go 13-4 2 years in a row. But that doesn't mean that. But I think that this is what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is doing is pretty smart, and he's not, and that we'll see, and particularly in 2024 and 2025, what that whole vision is and what kind of players he's bringing in and what he's willing to live with salary cap wise, and how he's going to structure the roster, who's going to make the big money and who isn't, and whether that works to get us to this first Super Bowl since 1976. Because, like you said earlier, Dave, the previous approach was not working.
Right.
It only got us to like 2 NFC Championship games in almost over 20 years.
The previous approach worked is basically the same thing. When Zimmer took over, he went younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
He got way young, and he trained those guys up, and they started to come up. And we had 2015, and but for a missed kick, and 2016 things started to fall apart. 2017 was woo, down the roller coaster. This is fun. Let's do this. And then 2018, once we got Kirk Cousins, everybody thought, yes, we were a quarterback away. Now we got the quarterback. Let's go. And then it went, and everybody, they tried pushing out. Players were older by that time. They were in their second, contracts are better. You got to have Zimmer. I got to have my boy,
Yeah.
Got to have Barr. Got to sign him, and all these re-signings. And then suddenly you went from a young, aspiring team that was full of upcomers and playing well and trained well to suddenly the team got older and there was more pressure, and you had a head coach that didn't get along with his quarterback, and it just went spiral downhill. And the head coach didn't get along with his, GM at that time. Something switched there, and it went to, down the tubes, and it and you ended up where we were, and everybody gets fired. And now we're starting on that all over again. But it's a good thing to start over, and let's keep it going and keep it doing that so we can aim for that trophy that's sitting over there on the screen.
That's true. And
never hoisted.
Never hoisted. But
Snyder set this in there. His team has hoisted it a few times. Unfortunately.
They have.
Mm-hmm.
They have. But one thing I wanted to mention, Dave, I didn't get a chance to, I forgot about it, was like the whole, people, when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah became GM after a disappointing 8-9 season, a couple of disappointing seasons, there's a lot of people, including myself, who are like, yeah, it's time to like rebuild, like tear things down, strip, get rid of everybody and get high draft picks and get lots of salary cap space and give Kwesi Adofo-Mensah free reign to totally remake the roster. But of course, there's no guarantee that will work. And you can, and then you get a couple of years where you suck, and then maybe you continue to suck for because your rebuild didn't work either. So,
and that may happen in Chicago.
That may happen in Chicago. So that they're trying here to like, yes, we're rebuilding the roster like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is doing, but yet trying to even out the low lows and not have the real low lows where you're 3-14 or 2-15 like the Bears just went. Picking on the Bears here, but let's see if that works.
Detroit so many years, year after year after year, and
I would rather if we can have a team that's competitive for playoffs almost all the time, but then gets to the Super Bowl and wins it because the GM is doing the right things as far as allocating money and making smart draft picks and picking free agents for good value for money, which Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been, particularly on the free agent side, he's not putting a lot of big money into any of the free agencies signed in the 2 years. Like, I am all for that. I don't want to have 5 seasons where we never make the playoffs and we're terrible. With just the hope that you might make the Super Bowl, a few years down the road. I'd rather be like in the playoff hunt all the time and hey, and then, and maybe you win the Super Bowl.
Jonathan puts up, as long as we win 2 against Green Bay, it'll be good. There was, speaking of dead times in Minnesota Vikings history, back in the 80s, prior to Denny Green and that whole crowd, the Vikings were not good and they were bad. And there was times, and I remember being in North Dakota, and we'd have a successful season if all we did was go 2-0 and both those wins were against the Packers. That's what we wanted. And if we got beyond that, everything was gravy. And that still applies as long as we beat the Packers. It's like the Niners beating the Lambs. They do it all the time. They own them. But it's one of those rivalries where your season, you go on to, win your division, but if you lost both games to the Rams and you're the Niners, something went wrong, right? It's something that you want to do. Or Ohio State and Michigan take a college battle. It's just you just don't do that. So what will happen first? Niners sickness, Vikings get their first trophy, or the Niners get their sixth?
Yeah.
Good question.
Niners are looking good getting their sixth right now before we get our first, but a lot can change in a couple of years.
Yep. So that brings us to theme 3. Mekhi Blackmon, our rookie spotlight.
Yes, we're getting down to the end of the 6 Vikings draft picks. We'd already featured 4 in previous weeks, and now we're going and taking a look at Mekhi Blackmon, my fan view, not a scout view, but a fan view of the Vikings draft picks, and Mekhi Blackmon's the guy that we're taking a look at today. And he was, people don't remember, the 102nd pick in the NFL draft, the last pick in the 3rd round for the Vikings. Going into the draft, of course, myself, many other draft experts, I'm not one of those, but we clearly cornerback was a need for the Vikings. Clearly the Vikings, we felt, needed to consider a cornerback for their first pick in the 1st round. And a lot of us wanted them to go for a cornerback in the 1st round. And there were some good ones available when it came time to pick. But the Vikings, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, decided to go offense. He went Jordan Addison, of course, from USC also. And Patrick Harris does not like Mekhi Blackmon. Begging to get him off the field.
Harms. Why so negative, Harms?
Anyway, but they went offense, and because they, of course, didn't have a 2nd round pick, it took them until the 3rd round and the last pick in the 3rd round to address it, in which they picked Mekhi Blackmon. A bit of a surprise, because there were guys the Vikings picked Blackmon over guys that were, at least from my readings, were more highly rated than Blackmon. Guys like Clark Phillips III from Utah, Keely Ringo from Georgia, Darius Rush, Tyler Fornes's man crush from South Carolina,
yes.
and then Kelly from Stanford. So the Vikings passed over all those guys, and some of them didn't get picked until the 4th and 5th round, actually. So, but the Vikings thought Blackmon was better than those guys. And what did they see in Blackmon that maybe others did not see? The one thing about Blackmon is that this guy played, and this is common with all of the Vikings 6 draft picks, is that he played a ton of college football. He actually played 6 years, 1 year in JUCO and then 5 years in FBS, 4 at Colorado, and then he transferred to USC for his 5th year. So this guy has played a ton. There's a ton of tape on him again. He played a ton of college football. And that may be one of the reasons why one of his strengths is recognizing route recognition. He knows what wide receivers what routes are going to run. He recognizes them quickly. He almost knows what they're going to run before they do. And I think that's partly because he played so much college football, 6 years of it, JUCO plus, college with the big boys. So I think that's a real pro for Mekhi Blackmon, is his route recognition. Like Jay Ward last week, who we talked about, the hybrid cornerback safety. Mekhi Blackmon is a guy who is versatile. He can do that multiple thing that Brian Flores covered so much. He played zone. He played a lot of press man to man in college, also comfortable in zone. He's played outside corner, but he also has played in the slot, in a nickel role. And that is something that, again, Brian Flores really covered. So that is really plus. And not only did he play those roles, but he was versatile, but he played them well, particularly last year at USC. If you look at his production last year at USC, it was pretty good, Dave. He had like 3 interceptions, 12 pass defenses, which were the most on the team. And here's the best part, only 48% of the targets thrown at him were completed. So I like that. He's a feisty guy, like maybe too feisty at times, which can lead to some penalties, but he's sticky in coverage. He can cover guys man to man. He can turn his hips and stay with them. I was watching some of the Senior Bowl one-on-one drills where cornerbacks are set up to fail. Tyler Fornes talks about that. Like of a lot of the guys that they showed, and they did fail badly on. Mekhi Blackmon really stuck to his guys. I was impressed with those one-on-one things where he's in a big disadvantage, but he held up quite well. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was at the Senior Bowl. He obviously noticed that, as did the Viking scouts. So that is a plus. Pretty good ball skills with Mekhi Blackmon. He is a guy that he'll make plays on the ball. He's not content to have somebody catch the pass in front of him and then rally and tackle them. He will make plays on the ball. He'll try to knock away passes. He's also a guy who will he'll contest catches. He's a bit undersized, but he'll rake at the ball at the catch point and create incomplete passes just by battling with the wide receiver at the catch point. So that's a plus. And the other thing is that he's a willing and aggressive tackler. Even though he's undersized, what I saw in the tape that in the games I watched was that when he tries to tackle a guy, even though he's not as big as them, he usually gets them down. And that's a plus because the Vikings defense did not tackle very well last year overall. Corners, safeties, linebackers, defensive tackles, defensive ends, you name it. Tackling was not something our defense did very well, amongst a lot of other things. But
they were told to stand back in their shell coverage.
Yeah.
And wait for the play to come to them.
And it did.
And it did.
At full speed. Blackmon is an interesting guy because when you watch the games, the highlights or the full games that are on YouTube, and then you read scouting reports, almost all the scouting reports say, this guy has great tape. Man, I love his game. And then after that, they say, yes, and he'll be drafted in the 4th or 5th round or the 6th round, or I don't even know if he'll get drafted at all. And so I'm going okay, if you love his tape, if you say he played great in his tape, shouldn't he be drafted higher than 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round or not drafted at all? So I think that a lot of the concerns are some of the cons with him is his size. He's about 5'11" and 180 pounds. He does tend to get boxed out by the bigger wide receivers. He's not going to get any taller. He's probably not going to get a whole lot bigger in the NFL. I'm sure he will get put on some muscle, but it's not going to be like he's going to be 200 pounds. So that's an issue that's not going to go away, and he's going to have to figure out a way to deal with that at the NFL level and not get boxed out and not let bigger physical wide receivers like the DK Metcalfs or the Deebo Samuels just physically manhandle him.
TJ Hawkinson in training camp will physically box him out.
Yeah. That's an issue. I think durability was an issue in college, and so partly because of his size, he had a fair number. Not last year, but in Colorado, he missed significant time in a couple of the seasons, and so again, that's something. You're going to the NFL. The players are bigger, stronger, faster. You are what you are. Can he stay on the field? I think that's a concern. And one of the other big things is that the last 2 years he had flagged 11 times for the penalties. When he gets beat, he tends to get grabby, and that's kind of his first instinct. So, and that leads to penalties, and that's at the college level. At the NFL level, they call it even tighter. So he could be even more flags called on Mekhi Blackmon if he doesn't get that cleaned up. Now, that's something that you can get coached up on. I think that's something that coaches can. It's a technique thing. So there's a chance that it can get cleaned up. But the other thing is that I'm sure at USC and at Colorado, they're like, hey, Mekhi, you can't be that grabby. You can't do this. I'm sure they tried to get it out of him and they weren't able to do it the last 2 years. So that's another concern for me. But again, maybe I think the size and people wondering, he played a lot. Will his skill, what he did at college, will it translate at the NFL when he gets, again, bigger? I think that's why people didn't feel that he was worth a second round pick or something a little bit earlier than what he was projected at. And somebody was mentioned earlier, there was a deep cornerback class too. There was a lot of great talent out there. So maybe this is the kind of year where a guy like Mekhi Blackmon picked in the third round or somebody in the fourth round still becomes a very good quality starter for you. But because there were so many great cornerback prospects, it's just one of those years where it's very deep. And maybe in another year, Mekhi Blackmon would have been a second round pick or an early third round pick. But those are the pros and cons to him. I think, the thing about him is that what kind of impact will he have in 2023 with the Vikings? What kind of role can we expect him to have? If you look at the Vikings last year, Chandon Sullivan was our nickel guy. He didn't do it. He was pretty bad at it. He hasn't been retained. Good riddance to Chandon. But
he's off
as bad as he was, he played 81% of the defensive snaps in 2022. Only Cameron Bynum, who played 100%, Eric Kendricks, and I'm forgetting somebody, Patrick Peterson. They were the only guys who played more defensive snaps than Chandon Sullivan. So if you're a slot corner in the NFL these days, and with the Minnesota Vikings in the 3-4, you're a starter. And the Vikings do not have an obvious successor to Chandon Sullivan right now. We talked about, maybe Byron Murphy could go in the slot.
And they've talked about, move Murphy inside. Well, if you're moving Murphy inside, how much are you dropping on the outside?
That's right. Yeah. Who's playing on the outside? I think Murphy, you'd want him on the outside because he played pretty well there last year with the Cardinals. We've heard about how Josh Metellus, the safety, how the Vikings, Brian Flores, are looking to get him on the field as much as they can and move him around and use him as a chess piece. And he's been employed in the slot in 3 safety looks. Again, hey, if it works, it works. I'm not crazy about that because Metellus is a safety. And I feel that cornerbacks, you want cornerbacks who they're supposed to be the cover guys. So I prefer to have a trained corner as your slot guy. And what I'm saying here is that the opportunity is there for somebody like Mekhi Blackmon, who has played in the slot plenty at the college level and done it pretty well, that there's an opportunity there for him he could be a rookie who plays a ton this year for the Minnesota Vikings where others do not and he'll play it in the slot. Doesn't mean he won't be an outside corner at some point in time. Again, he played that very well at college level as well at times. But I think this year in 2023, with the opening we have at the nickel position, in the slot position, Mekhi Blackmon, that could be where he makes his money this year, where he makes his impact as a Viking. And I think that he's going to make a real run as our starting slot corner this year. We'll see how things go in training camp. But again, minicamp, he was in with the starters, at least for part of that.
Right.
And don't know what to read into that, but at least the Vikings are certainly serious about getting him on the field and seeing what he can bring.
Well, out of OTAs and minicamp, I think the depth chart CB1, it'll be Murphy no matter what. I think Evans is ahead on CB2. I think Blackmon is right behind him at CB3, and then comes Booth at 4.
Yeah. So
that doesn't include who's playing nickel. That's the corners. With the nickels, you can add. Yeah, you could throw Blackmon at nickel. You could throw Murphy at nickel, or you can bring in Metellus or Bynum or whoever at nickel, right? Because they've all come in and done that. So it's going to be interesting to see how Flores mixes and matches and moves these chess pieces around the board. Because I don't think it's going to be as set as we're used to. I don't think it's going to be, this is my nickel. He's going to play my nickel. He's going to stand right here on the field.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And he's going to let people come to him. No, I think this is going to be a much different from what we see and who we see gets to play it. But we'll determine how that depth chart hashes out as we get closer to the season. But you're right. It's interesting. And if he can step up and take that job, just like you said before, I don't care if the guy's undrafted free agent, picked in the 7th round, picked in the 1st round. I want the best player playing.
Yeah, and I think Flores had also mentioned again introductory presser about like, are you playing a 3-4? And he was like, well, who are we playing, right? Like again, maybe a certain team with bigger wide receivers or use more two tight end sets. Maybe that's where Josh Metellus is the guy who's working in the slot, because maybe they don't have as quick, shorter, quick slot guys that we need a quicker cornerback to cover with. You can use Josh Metellus, who might be a better tackler and can handle the size a little bit better. And then you get some other teams where they got Brandon Cooks or somebody in the slot. Well, then Mekhi Blackmon brings in and Josh Metellus isn't in there, or Lewis Cine isn't in there, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Instead of like always running Chandon Sullivan out there, no matter who is in the slot.
As Mary says, an interesting time for our Vikings.
Always is.
Always is. And that is it for today. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I appreciate everybody there. I do want to thank Justin. He did bring up and post the dead cap hits. I'll put it up again one more time for next season. 28.5 for Kirk, 11 for Hunter, 13.38 for, and it just dropped off, for Harrison Smith, 6.8 for Davenport, and 3.1 for Cook. All money that if it wasn't, if we didn't have them for dead cap hits, we could spend on free agents. And that's a boatload of money sitting right there just for those guys. You're looking at what? Almost 30 for Kirk, another 11. So you're looking at $50 million for those top 3 players. Add another 6, 7, another 10. So that's almost what? 30, 50, 60 million dead? Come on. That would be enough to have some sweet free agents. And that's what Kwesi's building out of.
Yeah, no, it's a significant amount of scratch for sure.
Well, thank everybody for showing up today. You guys have been great, especially you, Niner, for popping in. I appreciate that. And Niner was talking about Rodecaster. That's why I was waiting on Friday's daily opener for my new piece of equipment, which is a Rodecaster Duo. It's an audio interface that allows me to use my new microphone, which you see here. It's a Rodecaster. This is a Procaster from Rode. And hopefully I sound a little bit better. We'll find out.
You sounded great.
Darren will get his this week. He'll be all decked out. And Tyler has his waiting on his front porch. But Tyler's out touching grass, as he said, out on the lake. What grass he's touching out on the lake? I'll leave that up to your imagination. Any last words there, buddy?
Yeah, we'll be getting into our last draftee spotlight in the next show, and that'll be Jordan Addison, of course, the wide receiver from USC. I was hoping, we've been lucky the past couple of weeks. We've had some LSU fans on our listening in, so they could give us their take on Jacqueline Roy and Jay Ward, but we didn't seem to have any USC fans, unless Patrick is a USC fan, and he obviously didn't like what he saw from Mekhi Blackmon playing at USC last year. Or maybe he was a Colorado fan and didn't like what he saw from Mekhi Blackmon the 4 previous years. I don't know. But yeah.
Could be. Hey, that brings us, tomorrow is Monday. You'll have a daily opener tomorrow morning, and then Tyler will be back for the Real Foreigners show tomorrow night, and he has some fun things planned. I think tomorrow night is where he brings all of the Vikings Wire staff, and they have a free-for-all tomorrow night. That's going to be fun to watch. So I highly encourage everybody to do that. Like I said at the beginning, we want to wish everybody a happy Father's Day. Hope you are enjoying it. For those that are fathers or had a father, like Mary, I know she misses hers dearly. With that, what do we say, buddy?
We say, SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!